Okay. Welcome, everyone, to the Women in WMUN podcast. I really hope everyone's excited to be here. I definitely am. I'm Karina Torres. I'm the president of Women in WMUN, and
I'm Karina Garcia. I'm the International Outreach Director for North America.
So basically, we really just wanted to create this podcast because Women in MUN is very committed to just making Model UN a very accessible place for women and girls. Our goal for this podcast is to be able to casually discuss different topics, experiences that we have, and just what to expect in Model UN, general topics that it might cover, and have a safe space for women by women. So, Karina, are you excited?
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, so first, let's talk about our Model UN experiences a little bit. So, Karina, do you want to start?
Sure. So, I've been doing Model UN since I was a sophomore in high school. I'm currently a senior.
I had a similar experience. I also started my sophomore year. I'm now a senior. I initially was in debate, so I was kind of familiar with like the debate space. But obviously, Model UN is very different. I used to be very rigid. In debate, you wear the same black suit the whole weekend for a whole tournament. And in Model UN, you're wearing pinks and blues and matching with your partner if you're a dual dal. So it's very different, but it's definitely a lot of fun.
Or you can meet twinums with the same name as you.
Yes, true.
Okay. So, today's topic is basically just the Model UN political space. What is the political climate? What are the demographics of Model UN, and how has this changed over time? So one thing that at least I've noticed is that Model UN is a very just male-centered activity, male-dominated activity, and it's just historically been like that. I think that any activity that has a bunch of men in suits pretending they're Harvey Specter, that's gonna make them a little bit hyped up, right? So Model UN now, though, is a very different activity. There's a lot of inclusion, right? And some may say wokeness. But point is that Model UN is a very different space. So we just thought we could talk about it and discuss. So what are your thoughts?
So I definitely agree. I just came out of a conference this past weekend at NYU, and it didn't help that obviously a lot of the guys are in suits. They tend to have deeper voices, especially, at our age. And they're obviously much taller than you. So me as like a 5-foot Latina, it's kind of hard to kind of get your voice out. Obviously, Model UN strives to promote equity and equality and making sure everybody has a say, which is why, when the dais is taking tallies, like they're making sure that every country has spoken an equal amount of times, but still, like the voices of men just always seem to overpower just because they do, for a lot of different reasons. So obviously, like, that's not really great, but Model UN has done a lot, like the activity, the people who are running it, they've done a lot to kind of try to change and mitigate that. Karina and I met doing CSW at Mixon at UM, which is the Commission on the Status of Women. So that was really cool, where it was a committee where you, like, along with women, you talked about women's rights. So that was like really cool, and I feel like that's a great way to kind of start bringing women more into the Model UN space.
Definitely. I think that Model UN has made grand strides when it comes to inclusion. You see a lot of different people nowadays in Model UN. It's not just white guys in suits. You see lots of lovely girls in their cute little dresses. You see a lot of minorities. I have been seeing so many Latinos recently in Model UN. Love them.
You're joining us.
So, yeah, you just see a lot of different people nowadays. And I think that Model UN is pushing for that. Yeah. It's really moving and kind of allocating itself far beyond that typical male-centered type of view, right? And so I think it's great.
I agree. Model UN, it's done a lot for me in terms of like my personal confidence. I'm not so shy to be able to like speak to someone else, even if they're a man who like towers over me, like 6 foot tall. I had another experience at another conference where the way that the auditorium was arranged was done through steps, And so one of the guys was at the tallest step, and so when he talked, he looked down on me. So obviously, like, because of Model UN, I've gained, like, you know, the confidence to just, like, be able to go to that extra step and, like, have a face-to-face conversation with him rather than him just kind of looking down. But obviously, even though Model UN has made a lot of strides to actually make a difference, make the space more inclusive, there are still a lot of kids out there who, like, we're still kind of, like, in that transition period where they're not really used to seeing women, you know, kind of in this male-dominated space. So I think it has, like, that plays a big factor in it as well, because obviously there's only so much the chairs can do. It's also the people around you who you're collaborating with and their mindsets.
I think also there's this mentality among some people in Model UN where it's like they have to be edgy to counteract the non-edginess of the chairs. There is a little bit of a stereotype that a lot of chairs are politically correct or whatever. And so I think that there is a certain demographic in Model UN that really tries to push against this. And I guess just to be funny, not necessarily even in a serious way, but I think it really puts a damper in Model UN and some people's Model UN experiences.
I definitely agree. In terms of, I guess, like how people are approaching the activity in general and inclusivity in general, I've noticed a really big issue is when certain people or like certain kids, like sometimes they're more inexperienced, which is okay. They're representing countries who have had political controversies, so it'll either be, for instance, Russia or China that they'll be representing, and sometimes some of the rhetoric that they use tends to be offensive. So even though the kids claim that the delegates claim that they're, you know, protecting and upholding the values of the country that they're representing, they're just using offensive rhetoric that's kind of harming the space. So I think obviously spreading inclusivity on that helps a lot. Because at the
Yeah. A lot of times, chairs, especially in bigger conferences, they basically just tell you, hey, if you're uncomfortable representing to its fullest extent the position of your country, you can diverge a little bit from it and represent what is comfortable to you. For example, if you're like representing Afghanistan and you're really uncomfortable with, you know, their stances on women's rights, then you can be a little bit more lenient on it. The issue lies also with just, it has to be a balance between representing your country and also being sensitive. And I think that sometimes it's difficult because the UN, at the end of the day, it's a free space, right? Every country goes there. Every country says what they want to say. And a lot of times it's not as sensitive, you know? And of course, Model UN, it's not the UN. It's a space that children, that teenagers, high schoolers are debating. So you have to have that element of sensitivity. So it's honestly just a balance, I feel like.
Kind of see people turning against each other because the country that they're representing are upholding, like, they themselves are upholding different values in the country that they're representing, and then they're also upholding different values in the kids are competing against in a conference. So it obviously creates a sort of tension, and it just doesn't become undiplomatic. And obviously that sort of lack of, you know, understanding that you're being, like, offensive or, like, that all those tensions building up actually causes, like, the kids to, like, be mean to the other kids and start to become offensive.
Yeah. Honestly, I also think that it's hard for a bunch of high schoolers to really put themselves into what they're talking about. You know what I mean? Yes, you're representing a country. Yes, you're being as realistic as possible, right? But at the end of the day, you're not the country, you know? You're not living it. You're not living these topics. And so it's kind of difficult to be like, hey, these kids in, like, I don't know, South Sudan are going through a war and it's the worst thing ever. And I'm some random kid in, like, suburbia. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
You're not there. You're not really there. And so it's very easy to detach yourself from these topics and to be a little bit exclusionary and to be a little bit offensive because you're not there.
On the point of detachment, actually, it's a very good point. People always talk about the first thing that you kind of do in a speech is you give a statistic. You will say, for instance, I just came out of, like, the Arctic topic, like sovereignty and security of the Arctic. I was in DISEC, and they would say the Arctic is warming at 3 to 4 times the rate of, you know, the rest of the world. And people just kind of use these statistics and kind of throw them around, and it's like, oh, the more powerful of a statistic that I have, the better my speech will be, because it's like, oh, however many deaths or whatever, but people start to become sensitive, and they don't realize that these are actual people who are actually dying, or actually people who are being affected because of things such as rising sea levels and global warming. So I do agree that Model UN needs to make a better effort. I think the fact that Model UN has switched to such a competitive event when it's supposed to be diplomatic, it's like you're diplomatic, but only to win. Like, there's no
Exactly.
you don't actually want to see anything come to fruition. Like, you're going to forget about this topic once you come home with an award.
Exactly. And it's honestly kind of sad, you know, you go into topics and into committees, and it's very clear when you have people that are literally just there for an award. You know, they don't care about the topic. They're just there to, you know, say a couple words and then go home with a gavel. And sometimes it works. Like, I'm going to be honest with you. Sometimes it works. And it's kind of disappointing, you know, because sometimes you have delegates, including myself, where you get very involved into a topic. You specifically pick a topic because you're very passionate about it a lot of the time. And it's disappointing, not necessarily that someone else would get an award, but that the same care isn't being put into the topic. And as much as we can move, I guess, demographically towards more inclusion, because once again, we have a lot more minorities. We have a lot more women in Model UN spaces. I have seen more LGBTQ plus folks also in Model UN. As much as we move demographically towards more inclusion, when we are talking about the issues at hand, they're still very Eurocentric type of mentality here. So sucks. Oh, chucks.
I think it's important for us to, because Model UN, it's not this one organization that's going to fix Model UN for every single college and every single high school. It's something that we as students have to implement, and we as students have to be wary of, because we're the change that we want to see.
Exactly. And I think that is a very great way to end
think
off.
so too.
Well, thank you everyone for listening. Join us next time. So thank you for coming to the WMUN podcast. We'll see you very soon.
See you. Bye.